Let's just start there. Thank you, Tyler. Um, and I'm going to share the purpose of our BioFi community of practice here in the chat, and I'll read it out loud for us. Our purpose is to cultivate and support a global community of practitioners who are designing, capitalizing, implementing, and evolving bioregional financing facilities through peer-to-peer learning and coordination. And we're going to learn about a very cool legal tool and general approach to land liberation today from our colleague Jennifer. Um, and yeah, why don't I share a little bit of context? We'll share some more links at the conclusion of the call here. So, Jennifer is the founder and executive director of Regenerative Earth, which is a nonprofit civil society organization committed to preserving biological diversity and indigenous wisdom in keystone ecosystems globally. And she's one of the leads of a super cool project that we're going to hear all about today called Sacred Contract. Sacred Contract represents a collaboration of three organizations that Jennifer is going to tell us more about, that together are leveraging innovative applications of legal structures to liberate land and support bioregional regeneration. Sacred Contract's vision is to fundamentally shift our cultural and legal relationship with the earth by liberating ourselves and the earth from an ownership relationship to a sacred relationship. So, this, of course, is very aligned with the ontological shifts and systems transitions that the BioFi project is working to catalyze, and that the bioregional financing facility framework is hoping to catalyze. We like to say that BFFs can help us take a multi-species, multi-generational perspective to how we invest. And the work that Sacred Contract is doing is enshrining that way of thinking and acting into a clear and durable legal and governance structure. So this is very practical, very applied. Um, Jennifer and colleagues recently supported a land title transfer of Pyramid Mountain in southwestern Colorado, making it the first mountain to quote unquote own itself. There's an Indigenous council governing this that we're going to hear about. So we'll hear from Jennifer about that project, also about a really cool project she's been working on down in the Osa Peninsula in Costa Rica, that's been applying systems design to economic transformation in the Osa Peninsula. And Jennifer, I will say, represented that project in Costa Rica, SEDPO, in the BioFi Cultivator program. So we got to learn a lot more about the work that's happening there over the 6 months of the Cultivator program. Jennifer is a deep systems thinker and designer. She's been a fellow at the Academy for Systems Change, and she teaches systems design at the University of Colorado Boulder in their master's program, and also at the University of International Cooperation in Costa Rica. So with that, over to you, Jennifer, to tell us a little bit about what you've been up to. And we'll have plenty of time for Q&A and discussion later in the call. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat, or we'll have a time for you to come in and ask your questions as well. Thank you, Jennifer.
Great. Thank you so much, Samantha. It's really a pleasure to be here with everyone. And it's fun because I was in the BioFi Cultivator representing SEDPO down in the Osa Peninsula. So it's really just a pleasure to be kind of circling back with a whole other bioregional project. And I look forward to sharing it with all of you. Um, so what I'm planning to do is just share a presentation on Sacred Contract, and it'll go into the legal model or bioregional approach, some of the lands that have already that are now sovereign, and then there will be a period of Q&A, and like Samantha said, I think there'll be quite a bit of time for that. So just hold your questions until then. And then I'm going to share my screen. And I'm just getting over a cold too. So I may have to mute every once in a while just to take care of myself. But yeah, and then I'll share my screen and hopefully this won't be too glitchy because I've had presenting this on Canva. Let's see here. And then we'll go down here.
Wow, what beautiful mountains.
Yeah. Um, so some of you may recognize this place. It's the Great Sand Dunes National Park. And this is where we're right now working on the proof of concept for a bioregional approach with this work. And Samantha did a really great introduction. So I'll kind of, yeah, just skip, just who I am and all that. But I am gonna, talk to you all today about the sacred contract work and the land that owns itself. Um, and Samantha also read through the vision, so I won't go through that again. And this deck, I think, will be shared with everyone as well. So, we are really looking at a root level, shifting our cultural and legal relationship with land through this liberation process. Our mission is to enable land and ecosystems to own themselves and be represented by Indigenous and local voices and assert their own legal rights. And so we are working with local title holders, with regional land stewards to permanently relinquish human ownership of their lands and legally give nature rights and support Indigenous-led intercultural guardianship councils. And we are a coalition of three different organizations. So it's Regenerative Earth, the Center for Democratic and Environmental Rights, it's Thomas Lindsay and Mari, and then the Center for Ethical Land Transition, which is Cassandra Ferrara and Abby Huff. And we came together all with a shared vision. I think each organization holds a different component of the work that we're bringing to the table and weaving together and then collectively created sacred contract. So we've been incubating it for about 5 years and then really implementing this work over the last year and a half, 2 years. Um, and so a little bit about sort of our theory of change and our approach is we are, we're really looking to address one of what we see as a core root driver of our ecological crisis. And how we're viewing it is that there's, a vicious cycle that is really founded in the belief system of human ownership of land. And that belief system, sees humans as superior to nature, as basically utilizing nature for human gain and benefit. So, we buy and sell land, we commodify it, we extract from it, we develop it, and then we have a legal system that codifies that mindset, and it gives rights to private property owners and sort of reinforces this belief. And then we have an economic system that incentivizes it as well, where humans are profiting, a considerable amount through the extraction and exploitation and commodification of nature. And so that, it incentivizes it causes humans to have a need and desire to own land, to own natural resources, to continue this perpetual cycle. And so, a sacred contract, we're really looking at disrupting this root driver in this vicious cycle. And we're kind of seeing, we're hitting it at different components. So one of the core ways in which we are hoping to disrupt this is by shifting, our mindset, our belief system around human ownership of land to one of a sacred relationship, to one of humans being understanding their connection to the rest of nature, understanding our interdependence with all species, and understanding that we have to be in balance and live in balance for all species to thrive into the future. So we are working at that relational level. And kind of shifting the mindset level. And then we're also working at the legal level, so creating a legal pathway where land can own itself, can be legally sovereign, and where humans really have to do things that are also benefiting nature. There's reciprocal relationships. There are ways in which the legal framework we're working with supports this sort of right relationship with the rest of the natural world. And then we are addressing the economic aspect as well, which is still in development. But the idea is that, that the economic aspect, right now our economic system does not really give back to nature. We don't value, we don't have that reciprocal kind of energetic exchange with the natural world. And so we're really looking at how do we incentivize that, encourage that in the framework that we're working with. So there are three different aspects of the Land That Owns Itself program. And the first part is enabling ecosystems to own themselves. And what we're doing is we've created a legal entity that can have the different aspects, different representatives of the ecosystem. So, like the water, the atmosphere, the forest, the plants and fungi. In essence, be on a board, this legal entity. So they are kind of representing themselves, and and then the title gets transferred into this legal entity. So that's how the title gets transferred back to the land, for the land to represent itself and owning its own title. And then we have human guardians who we've been working with majority indigenous stewardship, but we also see this as definitely intercultural and, having local guardians as well. And the humans are legally bound to do what's in the best interests of the land. So, they're not on the board or anything. They're basically voices for the different ecosystems. They have to sign legal documents, but again, they're legally bound to represent the land and its rights in the best way possible. And part of that, I see humans, these guardians, as translators for nature. Um, and then we have rights of nature easements, which are on, the different lands, and then the easements are held by a land trust. And sacred contract is actually being asked to step into a position of holding some of these easements when there's not a land trust that is working in the region, that can really understand what it means to protect the rights of nature. So this just adds a layer of checks and balances with the guardians as well, and serves as a vehicle to also monitor what's happening on the land. So our bioregional approach, I'm just gonna our bioregional approach, we chose to, I guess, take a bioregional approach because we were being contacted by different title holders from different states in the US, and then also in different countries. And I think for us, we really saw that working with a whole bioregion would be just much more effective and much more aligned with what we're trying to do. So, titles for land are really artificial boundaries. And so we're looking at how do we work within the natural boundaries of an ecosystem, of a bioregion, to support the whole bioregion because, land isn't isolated, in one place. And so we also had the unique opportunity in Colorado where multiple title holders were approaching us from one bioregion, which gave us the ability to move forward, with this kind of broader approach. So the idea is that we'd have one legal entity for all of the land titles. And that legal entity, in the case of the San Luis Valley in Colorado, is the San Luis Valley. And it's made up of the different ecosystems of the San Luis Valley. And so those titles are all aggregated into that legal entity represented by the valley itself. And we see this as sort of bringing fragmented parts of land back into wholeness. So there are rights of nature easements, that are created for each of the lands. And then one, indigenous-led intercultural local guardianship council that stewards, these lands. That really represents kind of the voices for the ecosystems. And then we're also doing a story of the land for each bioregion. So this really, it looks at what is the land's story, what is like the history of the land from the land's perspective. How do we track, just the different, indigenous peoples that have their ancestral relationships to the lands, and how, they may have been forcibly removed at one point, and how there was a fracturing of nature, when that happened. And also maybe there was mining in a place, but really understanding what the land has gone through over time, in order to educate the guardians and the people that are involved in this work. And then we're also doing restoration and management plans, environmental assessments. And this is being led by our indigenous guardians, and local guardians. So there's traditional ecological knowledge being utilized for this, as well as, bringing in science and ecology. And then the idea is that there'd be one permanent fund for each bioregion. So there would be, and I'll get into this a little bit more, but the idea is that the lands would have permanent funding in perpetuity. We're also working on, like, the legal entity is income tax has income tax exemption, but we're also working on property tax exemption as well. Oops, hang on a second. So this is a map of the bioregional structure, and so sacred contract is really playing a role of catalyzing the different bioregions. So we're working to set up the legal entity, supporting the guardianship council, for that speaks on behalf of the land. And then, in the case of the San Luis Valley, we're also looking at having local guardians that live in proximity to the lands that are sovereign. And then we have a local land trust that holds the conservation easements, and Sacred Contract will also be, doing that as well. And then a donor advised fund that would help to, again, just fund, these lands in perpetuity. And then there are revenue opportunities. It's still in the works, but I'll just give an example of two. One, for the state of Colorado, New Mexico, and actually Virginia. They're the only three states that do this. But when you have a conservation easement, you can get a tax credit for it, and then you can actually sell this tax credit through a marketplace for cash. And so the buyers of the tax credit pay 90% of it in cash, and the title holders receive that before they donate the title back, donate the title to the land. And so title holders are able to then put some of that revenue into this endowment for the lands. We're also seeing title holders wanting to endow the lands that they're supporting and becoming sovereign. So that's also happening. And then also people donating to sponsor, guardians, lands, bioregions. And then we are looking at regenerative ag, different, modalities. I'm not going to get into too deeply because it's still, in the process of getting worked out. And I think the biggest thing with the revenue aspect is that, um, this there's a line of integrity that we're really trying to hold. So any kind of agriculture really has to be regenerative, has to be benefiting, supporting the land, helping the land to thrive. Just bringing in, rewilding some of these lands. And so, looking at what are the best practices for that and how do we support, humans and farmers even and being able to do that. And so the idea too is that this initial donor advised fund could essentially catalyze the next one and so on. So they could really serve as the catalyst for new donor advised funds in different bioregions. And so Samantha spoke to us a little bit, but the first lands that own themselves. So we actually, the very first one was a 2-acre forest in northeastern Washington state. And so it became the first land to own itself. And the water, soil, atmosphere, the wildlife, plants, and fungi are all legally holding their own title. But there was not a guardianship model that was for humans to really come in and speak on behalf of the land for that. So that was really built out in this the mountain that now owns itself, which we successfully transferred the title to the land, to the mountain in June of 2025, which is a big accomplishment. There were a lot of people that contributed to this and made this possible. But it was a 40-acre mountain in the San Luis Valley, Colorado. And as Samantha mentioned, it's now become the first mountain to own itself in the United States. And we do have majority Indigenous guardianship. There are 3 Indigenous women who have ancestral relations to the land, as well as 2 locals who were raised at the base of this mountain. And then in September, we successfully filed the San Luis Valley legal entity, and that was approved. So we will begin aggregating titles into this bioregional, entity, so that the valley can begin to become sovereign and own itself. And so I'll just speak. Let me take a sip of water. I'll just speak a little bit to like why the San Luis Valley. And as I mentioned before, we had an opportunity with the San Luis Valley because there were multiple title holders that wanted to donate their titles and have the lands that they really love so much become sovereign. But the San Luis Valley is also a really special place. It's home to the Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve. It has the headwaters of the Rio Grande River. It's the largest high altitude desert in North America. Has a vibrant Indigenous and Hispanic history, and it also is, part of the Great Sandhill Crane migration route. It's a really important corridor for many migratory birds. And then, we begin to just build relationships, especially with the indigenous peoples who have their ancestral relations to this land, which are the Puebloan, the Ute, the Hopi. Um, I mean, there are actually many because there were many nomadic tribes that would go through there and use these lands as hunting grounds. But it is seen as the origination, the Sipopo for the Puebloan people. So they see themselves as having come out of the earth in this place. And so it, this some of the lands that we're even looking at becoming sovereign have some really important archaeological sites on them. So there are kivas, there are, yeah, just important sites for the indigenous people. And so we really want to also ensure that these sites are protected and are accessible, because a lot of private properties don't allow the accessibility to the indigenous, to be able to connect with these places. And it's really important for them and being able to connect with their ancestors and some of the deeper wisdom that is held within the lands. So our goals for 2026 are to build out this guardianship council for the San Luis Valley. And then also, we are hoping to catalyze one or two new bioregions. We're currently doing feasibility studies in the UK as well as Costa Rica. And then we are hoping in 2026 to transfer three additional titles, to the land, and also to fundraise for this permanent fund for the San Luis Valley. And right now we're looking at establishing a $5 million endowment for the valley. And then I think this goes into, oh yeah, and so and so we're also for 2026, we're also, raising money for our general operations and also for Pyramid Mountain, the mountain that now owns itself. Because that mountain was transferred prior to setting up an endowment. And so we're hoping to set up that endowment for the mountain in 2026, as well as support the general just operations of sacred contract to enable these lands to become sovereign. And then this is our team: Thomas, myself. Thomas is with the Center for Democratic and Environmental Rights. I'm with Regenerative Earth. Cassandra and Abby are both with the Center for Ethical Land Transition. And yeah, so thank you. And if you want to reach out, here's my email. You can go to our website as well, and we have a lot more information there. There's a contact form in our website, and yeah, so you can reach out that way as well.
Wow. Incredible, Jennifer. So inspiring. Lots of good questions in the chat. I'm gonna ask a couple first, but maybe folks could go ahead and start raising their hands. And then maybe Tyler can call on people. Um,
Sure. And I'll just make a quick
yeah.
pitch, as I love to do. And I promise it's not just because I'm lonely. It might be that too, but it's also amazing when we have human faces on screen. It just creates a level of warmth and connectivity that increases the vibe for everyone. So if that's easeful, feel free to do that. If you're in the middle of something, there's no pressure at all, but it's lovely to see you all when we have chats.
Yeah, nice to see your beautiful faces. Um, This is so cool, Jennifer. Yeah, I hadn't heard the how the bioregional approach had evolved, and that makes so much sense. And I'm curious how many parcels of land in that valley you all are in touch with about being transferred into about the titles being transferred. And then also if you could say a little bit more about the legal structure, right? So it seems like there's a legal structure that holds the land titles, but then perhaps a separate legal structure that would hold funding to support the ongoing stewardship of those lands.
Mhm. Yeah, so we're currently working with 9 titles for land to be transferred. And yeah, and I'll just say too, like, it's not, I don't see this as like a cookie cutter model. Like, it's going to be really specific to each bioregion, how this unfolds. And So I'll just say that too, just a little bit of a caveat. But yeah, we are looking at a separate financial structure, for the lands to support the lands. Part of, I think, working with the donor advised fund is we just have professionals that can really manage that and take the money in. But the land, the legal entity that the land represents will also be able to receive the funding. So some of those revenue streams can go directly into, the legal entity, which does have 501(c)(3) status. So the DAF would be more of the endowment, and we will be kind of working out for any additional kind of revenue streams, whether that goes directly into back to to the land or into the DAF, which then goes into the land. So.
Okay, so there's one unincorporated association that has a 501(c)(3) status in the United States for this particular entity, and then a DAF that's also receiving capital that is investing and generating returns and then flowing kind of resources for ongoing expenses to the unincorporated association. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I love the nerdy details of how we innovate in these legacy systems. Cool. Why don't you facilitate Q&A?
Sure, I'm stepping in. So I see your hand, Howard, Bill, and Carrie, and I invite others to raise their hands. I am gonna just go to the first questions that were put in the chat because I think there are a lot of great questions already coming, and thinking that Jennifer, you can just respond to them as I read them out, and then we'll get to folks who have their hands. Um,
That one was answered.
yeah, so there's this question from Alan Webb. How do Indigenous guardians you work with feel about working within bioregions versus ancestral lands of their own people as boundaries used for the purposes you described? For example, telling the story.
Hmm, that's a great question. So, yeah, I mean the indigenous that were, and I want to make sure I answer that correctly. Can you actually read that again,
Yeah,
Tyler?
yeah. How do Indigenous guardians that you work with feel about working within bioregions versus ancestral lands of their own people as the boundaries used for the purposes you described?
So like
Yeah,
regional frame, I
Yeah.
guess, of that geographic area.
yeah, that's a great question. I feel like the indigenous that we're working with, it's, their ancestral lands really go beyond some of the bioregions, and in this we're actually using the like a nodal kind of terminology as well. But we see kind of many different tribes and many different indigenous peoples that have the ancestral relations to this area. We're not defining it by a specific tribe and their ancestral territory, because there are at least, I would say, six or seven that have ancestral relations to this land. So I haven't received any from the indigenous that we're working with, any pushback at all about the bioregional language, but I think just with the question, I'll actually bring it up and ask them. So thank you for that. I'm not sure if I answered that
Yeah,
correctly.
I know
I
Bill
think
had a
so.
question.
Yeah, Bill, your question in the chat is a piggyback. So we're going to invite you to do just that.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a slightly different angle. So Alan's is an excellent question, but what I wanted to ask is how Sacred Contract is dialoguing with the indigenous land back movement. It seems like it's sort of complementary, but these are sort of distinct movements. And so it would be great to hear, how that how you're navigating that space respectfully.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been, we've learned a lot just through having this mountain in Colorado become sovereign. And how we're seeing it is that the land back is still using a legal, like it's still having, it's going ownership to ownership, so the land back is going owners, ownership, the indigenous are now owning the land, right? So actually, most of the indigenous people that we're working with really resonate with this, model, because this is how they've always thought. They never have believed that they're, owners of land, and so it actually reflects the indigenous belief system much more completely. And yeah, so that's kind of, some of the dialogue that we're having. Um, there's also several of the indigenous elders that we're working with, they talk about, we're all children of the earth and we all need to work together. And so there is also a piece of intercultural, stewardship that is really important as well. So, part of this work is sometimes there are situations where the land will go to an entirely indigenous guardianship, right? And there are other situations where it's appropriate to have intercultural guardianship, and we're working very closely with our indigenous advisors and allies and guardians around this. To really try to do this in the best way possible. And I mean, we actually for Pyramid Mountain did a whole reconciliation ceremony before the title was transferred. And part of that is because where the mountain is sovereign, now there are no indigenous peoples that are living in that community. And so it was really important to acknowledge, the past in order to move forward, and to acknowledge the fracturing that has taken place, on these lands by the forcible removal of the indigenous people who, we're all nature, right? And so it's basically like removing an arm from a place and severing that. And so that really needed to be acknowledged in order to move forward with repair and healing. And this idea of land sovereignty.
Thanks, Jennifer. That was a really comprehensive answer. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Next on the list I have is Howard. So I saw you had a question in the chat and just invite you to ask whatever's top of mind right now.
Yeah, and the question in the chat can be answered separately. What I really wanted to talk about was whether your model for funding going beyond the endowment and the DAF, the dedicated DAF, could also look to uh, collaborating with the Regen Network and developing credit classes around growing the biodiversity and, if you will, monetizing the carbon sequestration as it grows over time with the stewardship that the guardians would be providing or overseeing, I guess. So the question really is there room in your model for using eco credits that value the the thriving nature of the land?
Mm-hmm. It's a
And
great.
Jennifer, you'll remember that Regen worked with the Amazon Sacred Headwaters Alliance to develop their Jaguar biocultural credit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I believe there is room, in the model to incorporate that. I think, when we start to look at eco credits, agriculture, there's just like we really want to make sure that there are things that are really in alignment with this idea of reciprocity with nature, and they're really supporting, these places. So if there are eco credits that, are genuinely supporting these places, I know some of the carbon credit markets are, it can become greenwashing, but I know, with like Gregory and some of the work, like I'm curious to learn more and understand if that would be a good fit. But I think that there's definitely room, for it. And I think
If I may let me clarify, what I'm really suggesting is could the guardians create credit classes where they would be the stewards, they would develop the reciprocal arrangements, very much consistent with the charter that go into their formation. And in the way that our nonprofit, the Culture and Carbon Trust, is designed within our bioregion to uh, to have have native credits, if you will, that are intended to build the resilience of the ecosystems. And I'm wondering if that would not be a good model where the guardians would, by the terms of their stewardship, design the credits and guard against those extractions that are very much a concern.
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, as long as it's in alignment with what the guardians are legally bound to. So as long as, it's the guardians are able to, with this protect the different ecosystems of the land, protect the rights of the land, then it's absolutely possible, for them to work with it. Yeah, if
Thank you.
that. Mhm.
Great. Thank you, Howard. Okay, I'm just gonna be picking back and forth between raised hands and some of the more general questions in the chat. I want to go to you, Carrie, and then I'll pull one from the chat next.
Morning, everyone. Hi, Jennifer. We're both fellows at the Academy, and I got to meet you a few years ago, so it's nice to see you here.
Hey, yeah, I was like, oh, I know you're. Hey, Carrie.
I hope that I'm speaking for many of us, which is that I know part of what we're exploring in the BioFi project as co-creators is the question of how to fundraise and how to draw in financing, especially in the context of this endowment for perpetual funding support and yeah, just bringing, diversifying the source of funding, philanthropic funding, and PRI related investments that are coming in either through DApps or through all these different entities that you've set up, because I think many of us find that to be a significant obstacle to the work we're trying to advance.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think how we're looking at it is yeah, like originally we were like, okay, this will just be philanthropic fundraising and we are trying to think out of the box because I think it is important to diversify the way in which, funds flow and to support these places, these regions. And so how we're looking at it is, with the endowment, that endowment isn't just going to be from, us Sacred Contract going out and raising 5 million. Like some of that endowment will be placed by the title holders who are actually transferring supporting these lands to being sovereign. Some of it will be from philanthropy, from organizations or foundations coming in and supporting. But I also think, smaller donations, and what we're looking at is the sponsorship model of people just giving a little bit every month, to be able to sponsor guardians or bioregions or lands. I think that there are also opportunities, like I said, with regenerative agriculture activities, that happen, on these lands. And again, the important shift though is the money is not coming in and then going to pay for the people involved. It's the idea is that it's going in and it's not only, I guess, supporting some of the guardians, but it's going into really supporting the lands too. So it's about looking at how our economic system can, just flow money back into the land, so the land can receive what it needs to thrive. But I think that, Carrie, it is challenging, but I do feel diversifying is really important for fundraising.
Thanks for that question and response, Jennifer. I'm going to try to weave two questions that I see in the chat together. I think there's some folks who are just wanting a little bit more clarity on the structuring of these entities and the kind of purpose of the distinct entities. So Carrie Crisp has this question, just wanting to know more about the structure of the legal entity that allows the land to own itself. And then there's another question really asking what is the purpose of the conservation easement, and why is that needed if the land already owns itself?
Mhm. Great. So the legal entity, it's an unincorporated association. It's just after research of different legal entities in the US, this is one that you don't have to have people who are associators. So we were able to have the ecosystems actually be the associators of the entities. So that's the water, the air, the forest, fungi, plants, the wildlife, who in essence are the associators. And so they're the ones that are representing themselves. And that's how they're able to own, their own title. Um, the humans are, signing these documents, but they again, in the articles, they are legally bound to do what's in the best interest of the land and to represent the land in the best way possible and to basically protect the rights of the land. And so this is like part of why we have to do feasibility studies in other countries. We'll also have to do it if we work in other states in the US, is that not all unincorporated associations can hold titles. So there are a lot of dynamics that make this really unique and special to the areas like Washington State and Colorado, which both states were able to do this in. And then the other question, yeah, about the conservation easement is it's just it's another layer of protection for the land. So the land does own itself, but let's say one of the guardians kind of goes rogue or just does some things that are not in integrity. The easement is able to kind of enforce the articles, to protect the land. And so it's another layer that adds sort of a checks and balances with the guardians too.
Thank you, Jennifer. Do you want to take a deep breath before we keep peppering you?
Also, there are way more questions here than we're going to get to in the remainder of the time, but I love seeing the interest. And yeah, Jennifer shared her contact info, so I'm sure folks can follow up.
Yeah, and we'll post this recording on our high-low group, and I really encourage that to be a place for folks to continue this conversation. And we'll invite you to see that, Jennifer, too, in case you have time to respond to what people might ask there. So please know the conversation can continue. There's some questions about kind of specific legal structures in Costa Rica and how that's different from the US. I'm going to let that slide for now. But I want to go to Yvonne.
Thank you. I'm actually quite moved because I could have made the same presentation as Jennifer. Thank you, Jennifer, for what we're doing in Portugal with exactly the same words almost. But we're using here, we don't have a trust structure in Portugal, and we don't have an easement structure. So we've had to hack the legal system differently. We're using a foundation which we've structured as a trust, but we give a 99-year lease to the guardian that's renewable. So obviously it'll be beyond the life of any current guardian. But one of the issues that I've been dealing with is that we are the ultimate guardian. So if the guardian is not fulfilling their vision, because they have to present us a 7-generation vision in order to become guardian. So we're not dealing so much with the indigenous people, but anyone that wants to become a guardian, we have to be able to step in and work with them towards, and that's something we haven't crossed yet. So that'll be a very delicate experience whenever we get there. And also, the more I get into it, I'm donating my house and I'll become a guardian of a small 2,000 square meter, I don't know what that is in feet, let's say 10,000 feet plot. And then today I was with our first project, which is 1,600 hectares, which I think is, I don't know how many acres that is, square meters. But what we're finding is, I'm a guardian that wants to die on my property. The large property is a bunch of people that are employed in a way they receive salaries. So each guardian is very different, and we have to experiment with the guardians. And actually, the guardian is almost more important in some way than the land. And I don't mean that to not recognize the sacredness of the land, but if we don't take care of the guardian, all of us need all of us need to be nurtured in order to be able to also, by ourselves and by others, to be able to do the work we have to do. So I just wanted to check in with you about that nurturing of the guardian. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, the idea is that the guardians, also receive financial support, and they would receive that through the endowment. And then we also do a training with the guardians, and our sacred contract is actively kind of working with the guardians and supporting them and helping them with their needs, and helping connect them with people. And then they do also have a succession agreement that they've agreed to do, in terms of training new guardians that come in to replace them. But absolutely, like I feel the guardians are part of that land, their nature as well. And it's not about, it's about really kind of weaving, the nurturance for both, and for supporting the thriving, I would say, of all the natural communities, that are there. That's great. You're doing that work. I want to talk to you more.
Thanks, Eva. Thanks, Jennifer. I think we'll probably do one more question here and then give you a minute if there's anything you want to wrap with, Jennifer. And then we have a couple closing announcements on our ends about some upcoming things. So, Klaus, over to you. Please ask a question and try to keep it relatively brief if you can.
Sure. I wanted to follow up on what Howard was saying in regard to ecosystem service credits, because we are working with several NGOs to support a regenerative transition for small to medium-sized farmers. And they need separate revenue streams because you can't make enough money growing organic food because the market doesn't reward this differentiated type of crop. So we are creating secondary revenue streams by providing ESG credits. And I find that is important, not just for the credit itself, but you also want to measure success, right? So what it is that you do, and this is referring to the MRV, measure, report, verify. Simply for your own sake, does what you're doing really work in terms of improving water quality, improving soil health, and things of that sort, nutrient density in food. So there are some, and people are willing to pay for it. The Tesla collects some $2.7 billion per year in ecosystem credits, in carbon offsets. There's a lot of money floating there.
Can I interrupt just because we're coming to the close of this call? Could you just frame your question briefly?
So my question would be, would you be open? I mean, just be open to incorporating that into your thought process. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to maybe have another call just where we can do a deep dive around the eco credits and, whether that's, possible to bring in. Because I think it's really interesting. I know about Reseed and some of their work. I know they're not working in the US, but I really am drawn to that. I think it's very needed, and I would love to do a deeper dive with it.
Yeah, let's follow up on that, Jennifer. I've got some people in mind who have been exploring this work for a long time that I think can help us figure out some potential paths on that. Want to wrap this up?
Yeah, sadly, I think I'm going to bring us to a close here. Arturo and Louis really encourage you all to share your questions in Hilo. And so I'm going to post that link here in the chat. And so in case folks aren't aware, there's a group online with, I think, over 700 people in it these days. Folks who attend these calls, folks who are working in this space. We post all the recordings from these calls there. And there's a map feature, so you can find people near you as well, and get into some local organizing. So we'll post this recording and invite folks to post their continued questions there. And also just want to make you aware of how to stay plugged into what's going on with the BioFi project. The first thing is we have a Google Calendar. And so if you just want to add those events to your calendar, there's a link that you can follow there. We've got a YouTube channel. I'm pasting this all in the chat right now. There's a YouTube channel where we post all these recordings. And then there's an event coming up in about 2 weeks, which is a continuation of a pattern of coordination and organizing that we kicked off a couple months ago that we're calling Trans-Bioregional Coordination. And this next event will be less of a chance for different organizations working in this space to present and more of a chance for some kind of rapid speed networking and relationship building across all sorts of practitioners in this broadly speaking bioregional regeneration space. So that link is there. I think that's coming up in about 2 weeks. And then in case anyone is in the region of Western Massachusetts on the 22nd of November, Samantha and I were invited to offer the 43rd Schumacher Annual Lecture at the Schumacher Center for New Economics, which we were incredibly humbled to be invited to give. And if anyone's there, we'd love to connect. And we may be trying to pull together some gathering around that informally, just to build community and build relationships.
There'll be a reception, so we'll get to hang out. Would love to see some of you there.
Yeah, that's what I got. Jennifer, any closing words you want to leave us with?
Just thank you so much. And I love just the lively discussion. I'd love to, feel free to reach out, especially those talking about the eco credits. And I'd love to do a deep dive around that with you all. And yeah, and I think, just one last thing is just, this is also a movement, right? And the idea is that by working at a grassroots level, we will, ideally be able to, when the time is right, change legislation at a state and national level. And so, that's the hope and yeah, the wish for this, to give nature its rights.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks so much for this beautiful, inspiring work. Folks, feel free to come off of mute and say hello and goodbye.
Thank you, Jennifer. Do you mind popping your email into the chat? Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, organizers and Jennifer.
Amazing, Sam. Hi, Tyler.
Thank you.
Bye.
Drive safe, Kevin. You're scaring
Thank
me.
you.
We're off to Bhutan next
come
week.
on.
Oh,
This
safe
is a background.
Take care, friends.
Good to see
Thanks for hosting,
everyone.
Tyler.
More soon.
Bye.
Thanks, Jennifer. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.